Now, when you get the piece where you're happy with it, we're going to put a mark so that we can drill, so a punch mark, and this will be the back. And hole mark it now on the back next to your punch mark. Drill a hole, and I'm going to use a 1mm wire. You could use 1.2. You could basically use anything you want as long as it goes through the hole in your piece. So now that you're happy with the way this looks, anneal it because you've work hardened it from hammering it to get this matching finish. Once you've annealed your piece, use your bail bending pliers, and I use the bail bending pliers because they're the same thickness front to back. If you use your flat round pliers, it's difficult to get an exact bend because one end is thicker than the other. You can do it, but as you're bending, switch from side to side to make sure that you have a nice even bend. With these it's fairly easy because you just pick whatever size you want your bail to be, put it in the middle, make sure your hammer marks are on the outside, and then you can just bend it by pushing it with your fingers. But you want to make sure that the ends meet. So you just look at the end and push a little bit at a time until you get it the way you want it. So that'll do. Now we can put our wire in and solder it. So we're going to take our rivet wire, although it's not really going to be a rivet, file it flat, make sure it fits through the hole in the bail, and it does. So it's a fairly snug fit, which is what we want because we're going to solder this later, and it needs to be a really good fit to solder it. So the first thing we're going to do is solder it down here on the inside. Now I'm just sitting it on my charcoal block, but I'm going to use my third hand just to make sure that the wire stays in the middle, because it's quite easy to get it a little bit off. So that's where I want it. Check your flux, make sure it's nice and creamy. If there's liquid on the top, that's just water. So just a little bit of flux where the wire touches the inside of the bail. A small piece of hard solder. Place it with your flux brush and place it right against the wire where it's touching the bail. I'll zoom in so you can see. So you can see where the solder is touching the bail. So gently dry out your flux at first. Make sure the solder stays where it's supposed to be. And I'll replace it with my flux brush because the flux acts a bit like glue once you dry it out, if you dry it correctly and keep from bouncing the solder off. So my flux is dry, and I'm just circling the bottom of the bale because I don't want to get the wire hotter than the bale, otherwise the solder will jump up on the wire, and you could see that when that flowed, it just flowed very nicely between the base and the wire. So quench this in water. Now you can see how wide this is, and this was just so that I could solder this on without mistakenly soldering this top part. So what we're going to do is just cut this as close as you can with your side cutters. Always keep the end of the wire in check. And because we've used the side cutters, we've actually made this oval, so we need to file it back now. Don't hit this, just file this flat on the end until you get to the point where once it's nice and flat, you'll know it's round. So now we're going to open this up. You could hold it in your flat round pliers, but usually because you've soldered it, it's annealed. So now you can just assemble it on your pendant. So it's going to go like this. Turn it over. Push this back through your hole. And you may have to fiddle with it a little to get it to line up, but it will just push back through. So just push it until you get the shape you want. Once you get the shape you want, we'll solder this on the back. So a little bit of flux. Another small piece of hard solder. Place it so it's touching both the bale and the wire. Slowly warm the flux until everything is where you want it to be. Push it into place with your solder pick. And then circle the wire and the bale. And when the solder flows, back away. Quench, pickle, check to make sure it still moves. And by doing this way, we don't have any marks on the outside. All of the marks in the cleanup will be on the back. Once you're out of the pickle and your solder looks good, just cut that nub off with your side cutters. Once again, keep the end from flying across the room. File this stub back and sand it. Now, what you don't want is to damage the the shape of the pendant. So make sure when you're filing that you don't hit this. If you've pinched your bail too close together, you won't be able to get it far enough apart, in which case you could use an abrasive wheel to cut this down. It won't be as smooth a job as your filing and sanding, but it'll work. We just don't want the sharp bit. But once again, I'm using my old style ring clamp to hold this. File flush, sand, and the finer the sandpaper you use for the finish, the nicer the finish will be. I always start with 400. You work your way down to 1,000, and when you polish it, there won't be any marks visible at all. So now it's time to polish it, and I'm just going to put it in a tumbler. Okay, it's out of the tumbler, and I'm quite happy with it.